Chapter 26 The only heroes are you and me. What's, no wonder. Pluto Rayleigh is the vice-captain of Roger's pirates. His strength has reached the top level of this sea. What's wrong with Mr. Rayleigh being my teacher? Barrett seemed very dissatisfied with Darren's reaction, roaring angrily and gritting his teeth. Darren, if you have the guts, just kill me. But if you dare to insult Roger's pirates, I will never let you go. Although he parted ways with Roger's pirates in the end, Barrett still respected everyone in Roger's pirates in his heart. Not to mention that Captain Roger's unparalleled strength deeply impressed his arrogance and self-confidence. The other crew members of Roger's pirates also took good care of him as a newcomer. Not only did they not blame Barrett for constantly challenging Roger's reckless behavior, but they also got along with him like a real partner in daily life. When did it start? Was it the cigar that Mr. Jabba threw to him when he failed in the challenge, or Vice Captain Rayleigh who smiled and comforted him, "Keep working hard, we all believe you will become stronger and stronger"? Was it the two noisy kids Shanks and Buggy who said they wanted to celebrate his birthday, or the others who urged the fishman Samble to compete with him in arm wrestling? Was it that he was too poor to buy wine and could only drink the inferior wine he brewed himself and finally fell down due to poisoning, or was it the party in the cold wind and snow? The countless bits and pieces of daily life have long melted the coldness and estrangement in Barrett's heart, making him forget the pain of being betrayed by his comrades in the army in the past, and accepting and identifying himself as a member of Roger's pirates from the bottom of his heart. So he would never allow anyone to insult Roger's pirates. Don't be so angry. I don't mean to insult Roger's pirates. Darren looked helpless and exhaled a puff of smoke from his mouth. Although we have different political views, I absolutely recognize the strength of Roger's pirate group. After all, I can't beat Roger. I mean, don't you want to know the secret of my rapid improvement in strength? Barrett was stunned. The secret of such rapid improvement in strength. What other secrets can there be to improving strength? Isn't it just practicing day and night, constantly pushing yourself to the limit of your body? But looking at the half-smiled expression of the Vice Admiral in front of him, Barrett couldn't say a word of rebuttal. It took him a whole year to develop the devil form, but this guy in front of him learned it in 5 seconds. Thinking of this, Barrett was so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood, and he wanted to give himself a big bag. It's all my fault for showing off. If I hadn't taken the initiative to reveal the secret of the devil form, Darren would never have been able to learn it so quickly. Well, it takes at least 20 seconds. Damn, what difference does it make? Barrett suddenly became discouraged, and the light in his eyes dimmed. As if he had guessed what he was thinking, Darren laughed and said, "You don't have to be so depressed. I was able to master the devil form so quickly not because of your revelations." "What is that?" Barrett said weakly. "It's just because I'm strong enough." Darren laughed. "Barrett. Are you comforting me? You might as well not comfort me. What I mean is that I was able to master the devil form so quickly because I have developed my body to the extreme. If it were someone else, even if they knew the principle, they would not be able to learn the devil form." Darren smiled and said, "So you don't have to be so depressed." "So what?" Barrett looked like he didn't want to talk to you. A glimmer of interest flashed in Darren's eyes. "Barrett, I know your life goal is to become the strongest in the world, but you have to understand that if you are imprisoned and impelled down by me, you will never be able to achieve this dream." Barrett suddenly fell silent, his one-armed fist clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Although he had never been to Impel Down, he knew exactly what kind of place it was. Gloomy, hungry, sick, tortured. In the hundreds of years since the establishment of Impel Down, no one has ever escaped from this world's #1 prison. In such an environment, even if he had enough perseverance and will, and trained hard for 10 years, his strength would probably not be improved too significantly. And what about Darren? This opponent, whom he regarded as his enemy of his life, was free and easy outside. When he was equally free, his strength could not improve as fast as Darren. If he was imprisoned and impelled down, he would not be able to catch up with him. Have you figured it out? Seeing that Barrett's thoughts were gradually being led by him, Darren raised a slight arc at the corner of his mouth and continued to persuade him. Barrett, a man like you should not live alone in a ghost place like Impel Down and spend his life in mediocrity. Just as you regard me as your best opponent, I am also full of expectations for you. If there is no one like you on this sea, a decent opponent will become boring. HMPH. Don't waste your time, Darren. I won't be fooled by you. Barrett snorted coldly and said sarcastically. Kaido, Charlotte Linlin, Wang Ji, John, Whitebeard, not to mention the invincible Captain Roger, there are so many strong people on this sea. I will never agree to become the so-called 7 warlords of the sea. He seemed to see through Darren's sinister thoughts and said it mercilessly. No, Barrett, you still don't understand. Darren shook his head and talked freely. There are indeed many strong people on this sea, but in my opinion, those few strong people are just in name only. Kaido is known as the strongest creature on land, sea and air. He has tremendous military power but hides in Wano country to pursue his war dream. Charlotte Linlin has severe bulimia and only thinks about having children every day. She is not an opponent at all. Wang Ji John is just a loser in the old era and has long been unknown. As for the Whitebeard who is known as the strongest man in the world, his mind and fighting power are indeed broad, but he does not think about hegemony. He guards his territory and plays stupid house games. As for Roger, I won't say anything. I don't mean to belittle him, but he really can't be called a pure pirate. At this point, Darren sighed with a lonely look. I'm not targeting them. I mean, they are all garbage. In this world, only you. He stared at Barrett with burning eyes. Only you, Douglas Barrett, are qualified to be my opponent Roger's Darren. The ocean is so vast, and there are only you and me, the 2 true heroes. As the last word fell, Barrett's face suddenly changed. Chapter 27 Congratulations, Shichibukai-sama. What did you say? Barrett stared at Darren with his eyes fixed, somewhat incredulous, clearly not expecting Darren's evaluation of him to reach such a high level. But at the same time, he subconsciously straightened his chest, and his eyes burst out with a blazing light like a flame. Barrett's subconscious action and reaction made Darren laugh in his heart. Barrett is still quite young now, not much older than Doflamingo. Although his physical development is different from that of ordinary people and his body is strong and sturdy, to put it bluntly, his mental age is just that of a kid. Not to mention the tone of the pirate world. Who among the reckless men on this sea can listen to these words? The most important point is that these words came from Darren, a strong man who ended countless legendary pirates. Recognition from Darren. What a high gold content. At this moment, Barrett only felt that his whole body was full of strength, and even his body couldn't help but tremble slightly with excitement. Isn't it? Darren kept a serious look on his face. How old are you this year, Barrett? 16, 17. At your age, your strength has reached such a level, enough to be a gold medalist on par with Kaido and Whitebeard. If you are given a few more years to grow, who in this sea dares to say that they can defeat you? Hearing Darren's words, Barrett was struck by lightning and stood there in a daze. Yes. How old is he? There is still a long way to go in the future. As long as you give yourself a certain amount of growth time, no one in this sea will be your opponent. Darren's words exploded in Barrett's heart like a thunder, dispersing the depressed mood brought by the defeat at the hands of Darren, and also cheering the latter up again, with infinite light in his eyes. But if you are locked up in the city of Impel Down, all this will be gone from you. Darren suddenly changed the subject and his tone became sarcastic. Think about it carefully. You can't beat me now. Even if you are locked up in Impel Down for a few years, the gap between you and me will only get bigger and bigger. You will never have the chance to challenge the throne of world number 1, let alone dominate the sea. Maybe by then, you can't even beat Crocodile. Enough. Barrett suddenly shouted, interrupting Darren with red eyes. Shut up, Darren. As if he couldn't accept the picture Darren described for him, he gasped for breath and struggled violently, making the cold and hard seastone shackles rattle. His mood was ups and downs, as if a raging wave had been set off. Darren lifted him to the peak in the previous second, but the next sentence directly brought him to the bottom. With Barrett's competitive personality, how could he accept it? Looking at Barrett's reaction, Darren smiled with satisfaction. The fish has been hooked. For a proud kid like Barrett, death is not the most terrible thing. What is more terrible than killing them is that they cannot fulfill their lifelong dreams and watch their former weaker opponents surpass them. Shut up. That's impossible, Barrett. This is the punishment of the winner to the loser. Darren smiled. But if it were someone else, I really wouldn't waste my breath. I don't want to lose you, a powerful opponent. So, become a member of the Shichibukai. As long as you agree to become one of the 7 warlords, you will regain your freedom, and this will have no effect on you. You can continue to challenge more powerful people and realize your dream. The most important thing is, don't you want to know how I became stronger? I will tell you this secret. You will become stronger and stronger, crush all opponents with absolute strength, and even challenge Roger again. The voice of the Vice Admiral with a chuckle slowly echoed in the gloomy cabin prison, like the devil's mumbling, with some inexplicable incitement. Barrett gritted his teeth and was obviously entangled. He wavered. Darren smiled more deeply and added, you don't have to worry about what constraints you will be subject to after becoming the 7 warlords. I can assure you that except for emergency summons when necessary, the Navy has no power to mobilize the 7 warlords to fight. And once you become the 7 warlords, you and I will be allies to some extent. He delivered a fatal blow. When the time comes, you can come and fight me anytime. Silence. Death-like silence descended. Barrett suddenly stopped panting, lowered his head, and let his messy golden hair cover his face. Darren was not in a hurry, but just smoked quietly and waited patiently. For a full minute. So, what is the secret of your strength? Barrett raised his head and asked hoarsely. Darren smiled with satisfaction. On the deck of the warship, Borisolino was still lying on the beach chair, basking in the sun leisurely. The 3 lieutenant generals of the headquarters were faithfully performing their duties and observing the situation on the surrounding sea from time to time. Suddenly, the 3 lieutenant generals of the headquarters seemed to sense something, and their faces suddenly looked like they were facing a great enemy. Alert! They all drew their sabers at the same time, staring at the cabin door. The other Navy on the ship also reacted immediately, drawing their weapons one after another, with countless guns aiming at the cabin exit at the same time, looking extremely alert. Bang! The wooden door of the cabin was smashed open and shattered. A burly figure with a strong aura walked out of the darkness, twisting his neck, and walked over to sit directly next to Borsellino, ignoring the hostile eyes and guns of the surrounding Navy. Relax a little, the one in front of you now is our Navy's ally. Lord Douglas Barrett. Darren walked out of the cabin slowly, smiling with a relaxed look. The recruitment was successful. The 3 vice admirals of the headquarters looked at Barrett, who was sitting there eating meat and drinking, looked at each other, and then retreated with the Navy soldiers. Soon, after eating and drinking, Barrett burped and lit a cigar without hesitation. So that's it. He glanced at Darren. Darren shrugged and smiled. What you should do next is your freedom. ... Just don't be killed by others easily, otherwise my time and energy will be wasted. Tisk. Barrett sneered, and said with a rising fighting spirit. I won't lose again before I kill you, Darren. Do you agree with me? The bold words even inspired Barrett's domineering aura, and a fierce wind swept through the surrounding void. Darren relit a cigar and smiled. That's great. By the way, I almost forgot to congratulate you. He paused. Your Excellency, the 7 warlords of the sea. Quote. Chapter 28 The Soaring Flamingo. Under the impact of Barrett's domineering aura, the surrounding Navy soldiers all staggered and could not stand steadily. With a snap, the glass on the coffee table suddenly cracked, and then exploded into pieces, and watermelon juice spilled all over the floor. Hey, don't vent your domineering aura casually, my watermelon juice has spilled. Borisolino muttered with a headache on his face. Barrett glanced at Borisolino next to him, and suddenly said, Hey, you are also the existence of the Navy headquarters known as a monster, right? How about we have a fight? At this time, he had recondensed an arm, and his eyes were full of fighting spirit, twisting his fingers, grinning. "Let me see, what qualifications do you have to keep pace with Darren?" A strange light flashed across Borsellino's sunglasses, and he raised his hands and grinned. "I surrender." Barrett's smile froze, and he gritted his teeth and said, "Why?" Borsellino scratched his head. "I can't beat a monster like you, so I can only surrender directly." Barrett. Before, he was beaten down by Darren in front of so many Navy officers, and then was locked up in the cabin prison of the warship. This was difficult for him to accept because he was very proud and competitive. Especially now that he has become a member of the 7 Warlords of the Sea, it is estimated that dealing with the Navy will become the norm in the future. If this series of black history cannot be washed away, how can he survive in the 7 Warlords of the Sea? Anyway, Darren couldn't beat him, so Barrett simply thought about getting his revenge on Borsellino. Of course, there was another reason. That was that for some reason, when he saw Borsellino's face, he felt itchy and wanted to beat him up. This was an inexplicable impulse, and Barrett was also very strange in his heart. After all, he had never had any conflicts with this guy before. But he never expected that this wretched-looking guy would be so stubborn and even surrender in front of so many subordinates, admitting that he couldn't beat him. Does he have no face? Are all Navy officers so shameless? Feeling the strange eyes of the Navy around him, Barrett gritted his teeth and suddenly grinned. "This is not up to you." Boom. Without the slightest sign, Barrett's figure suddenly jumped up and knocked all the drinks and food on the coffee table away. A stern purple-black color quickly spread from the center of his eyebrows, covering his entire body in the blink of an eye, and instantly entered the devil form, crashing directly into Borsellino's arms like a crazy beast. Boom. The two figures suddenly smashed the cabin, and in the countless collapsed wooden boards, they turned into two light shadows, one black and one gold, which kept colliding in the air and shot straight to a deserted island in the distance. Boom. A huge explosion sounded from the deserted island, and billowing black smoke rose into the sky. The sudden change made all the Navy faces present immediately startled, and their faces changed drastically. "Vice Admiral Darren, what should we do now?" That bastard Barrett actually attacked Vice Admiral Borsellino. He violated the agreement of the 7 Warlords of the Sea. The 3 Vice Admirals of the headquarters immediately became anxious, and cold sweat oozed from their foreheads. "Should we take action? We can directly launch the Demon Slayer order now." They looked at the distant island in shock, and they were so nervous that they swallowed their saliva. At this time, a fierce battle had already begun on the island. From time to time, golden beams penetrated the void and exploded into surging flames after sinking into the sea. "Be calm, and believe in the strength of Lieutenant General Borsellino." Darren waved his hand and lay on the beach chair as if nothing had happened. Besides, Barrett's injuries have not recovered yet, and he can't make any waves at all. The 3 lieutenant generals were stunned. Lieutenant General Darren was too calm. Is this the demeanor of a strong man? But before they could fully react, a ray of golden light had already flown back from the distant island and gathered into a tall figure on the deck. Borsellino casually threw Barrett, who was spitting blood from his mouth again, his body was charred and smoking, and twitching, to the ground, and spread his hands in annoyance. "It's so scary, I almost got killed." 3 Vice Admirals. "No, your uniform isn't even dirty." "Damn, your strength." Barrett spat out blood and stared at Borsellino in disbelief, his eyes bloodshot. Darren was not surprised by this result. After all, Barrett was seriously injured, and it was overestimated that he could exert 70% of his strength in his prime. He smiled and said, "Didn't you say that you won't lose again before you kill me?" Barrett's face suddenly became as red as a pig's liver. He gritted his teeth, almost vomiting blood again, and hesitated. From now on. 3 days later. A piece of news appeared on the front pages of major newspapers at the same time, and spread throughout the world at an extremely exaggerated speed. The 7 Warlords of the Sea system is established. Legal pirates, all their sins will be forgiven. Close double angle bracket. Open double angle bracket unprecedented. Pirates will become allies of the Navy. Close double angle bracket. Open double angle bracket. The 7 warlords of the sea. Are they the running dogs of the government, or tools for the pirates to seize power? Close double angle bracket. Countless reports about the 7 warlords of the sea system seemed to have grown wings and flew to every corner of the sea, like a heavy bomb, turning the sea upside down. Countless pirate groups, dark forces, government leaders. All paid attention to this system established by the world government. Some people ridiculed, some sneered, some were ambitious, and some were indifferent. But there is no doubt that the establishment of the 7 warlords of the sea system has indeed made the situation in the sea more turbulent and chaotic. Many people began to move, analyzing the pros and cons of becoming the 7 warlords of the sea. And more people put their attention on the official list of the 7 warlords of the sea. Sand crocodile, the original bounty was 281 million Baileys. Douglas Barrett, the Devil's Descendant, originally had a bounty of 2.174 billion Baileys. Although there are only 2 candidates for the 7 warlords of the sea, there is no doubt that the terrifying bounties of these 2 guys are enough to prove their strength. While people were shocked by the exaggerated bounties of these 2 people, they were also curious about how the Navy recruited them. North Sea. Lubeck Island, Don Quixote Family Meeting Hall. Torrebel and other cadres knelt on one knee on the cold marble floor, bowing their heads respectfully. It's time for us to act too. The newspaper in his hand was suddenly cut into pieces by some invisible weapon. Doflamingo grinned, put his hands in his pockets, stepped on his unique arrogant steps, and strode out of the meeting hall. The pink feather coat flew up without wind behind him. Let's go, don't let the Godfather wait anxiously. One day, Don Quixote Doflamingo, the giant of the North Sea underworld, broke into the Grand Line with an unstoppable attitude, and no one could stop him wherever he went. His bounty soared all the way. When he stepped into the New World a month later, his bounty had reached 340 million Baileys, nicknamed Flamingo. Chapter 29 was it also interrupted by that navy. New World. A certain island. Towering trees tens of meters high are scattered all over the land, and the vegetation in the jungle is very lush. Bang! Roger threw the seriously injured rear admiral to the ground and said with a smile. If you want to arrest me, bring Garp and Sengoku. Blood gushed out from the wound on the rear admiral's chest. He gasped for breath. His subordinates were lying on the ground. The warships not far away had sunk into the sea. Damn, don't think you can be arrogant for long. He stared at the people in Roger's pirate group in front of him and gritted his teeth. There is no need for Vice Admiral Garp and Admiral Sengoku. Vice Admiral Darren can kill you all. After saying this, he fainted. Tisk, it's that damned Navy kid again. Roger snorted and said dissatisfiedly. Since he killed Shaki, the reputation of that Navy kid has become more and more famous. While speaking, he subconsciously touched the belt of his trousers. The plastic texture of the belt buckle made him feel more secure. Recognizing his little action, Rayleigh and others smiled and shook their heads. After all, it was the Golden Lion. That kid killed Shaki, which is the most glorious military achievement of the Navy since the Valley of Gods. Rayleigh was a little emotional. After all, Golden Lion, he and Roger were from the same era. Even though they were enemies, they were almost killed in the Battle of Ed-Or. But he couldn't help but feel some regret for Golden Lion's death. Jabba also frowned and said. Especially since that kid vowed to march into the New World. Now the morale of the Navy in the New World has been boosted. Otherwise, a mere rear admiral would not dare to trouble us. And the latest government and Navy have made big moves. The newly promoted Shichibukai. Even Barrett has joined in. Rayleigh joked, so now Barrett is also our enemy. Just as they were chatting, Roger, Rayleigh and Jabba's faces changed at the same time. Their relaxed eyes suddenly became sharp, and a strange red light flashed in the depths of their pupils. Ship, Captain. Something seems to be approaching quickly. At this time, Bucky, who was standing on a big rock, shouted in a trembling voice. He held the binoculars in his hand and stared at the direction of the distant coast. It's so fast. It's a person. It's a warrior. Samurai. As soon as these words came out, the eyes of the other members of Roger's pirate group suddenly lit up. They knew very well that they came to this island this time just to find the legendary samurai. Finally here. Roger laughed loudly, and his domineering and fierce eyes instantly locked onto the figure running fast in the jungle in the distance. Bright phoenix eyes and thick eyebrows, long and wild black hair gathered into a large circular plane on the top of the head. Wearing an orange kimono with a crescent moon pattern on the chest, and huge purple and white shimenawa tied on the shoulders and waist. It was exactly the dress of the rumored samurai. What made Roger a little confused was that this samurai had only one arm. You must be Roger. I am Kazuki Oden, the sworn brother of Whitebeard. Among the mountains and dense forests, Kazuki Oden laughed with great fighting spirit, and his observation haki had locked onto the figure in the red captain's coat. Although he had been depressed for a long time from the various news about the Navy in the newspapers during this period. But at this moment, he finally faced Roger, a man recognized and even praised by his sworn brother Whitebeard. All the depression in his heart faded away at this moment, leaving only endless fighting spirit. He has not forgotten that his biggest dream was to challenge the strong on this sea when he traveled from Wano country. And the man named Galdi Roger may be the top fighting force on this sea. Not to mention that Roger is also a top master who is good at swordsmanship. When he thought of being able to fight the strongest pirate in the world, Kazuki Oden was so excited that he trembled all over and his face flushed. Come on, come and fight. Clang. Kazuki Oden roared with full fighting spirit and pulled out the big sword made by the master craftsman of Wano country, 21 skills. Aim no habakiri. The figure jumped up. Oden's two-sword style, sword drawing technique. The purple-black flowing cherry quickly wrapped around the blade of Aim no Habakiri like a stream of water. The moment he stepped on the ground, the figure shot towards Roger like a sharp arrow. Ha ha ha, well done. Roger laughed out loud instead of being angry, and took a step forward. Zzzzzzz. The black and red lightning densely wrapped around the long sword in his hand, and he slashed out with a knife. Gods avoid it. The black and red knife light exploded, and the knife that made the ghosts and gods retreat pierced through everything. Kazuki Oden's pupils shrank, and he couldn't react to what happened at all. A blood groove had exploded on his chest, and blood spurted out. He flew back at a speed several times faster than when he rushed over, knocking down more than a dozen towering trees before he was embedded in the barrier of a mountain range with a confused look on his face. Rocks flew everywhere, and Kazuki Oden spat out a large pool of blood with a wow sound, his face full of disbelief. The guy's knife didn't touch him at all. But the knife light cut his body. This is simply unbelievable. He gritted his teeth and wanted to attack again in disbelief. But a tall and burly figure had already jumped up from behind him. The wide white captain's coat danced wildly behind him with a long golden hair like a golden crown, and the sword held high in one hand sprayed out the same strange black and red lightning. The strongest man in the world. Edward Newgate with white beard. Ha ha ha, you're here, Newgate. Roger's eyes suddenly lit up with a fiery light, and he started running with a laugh. Neither of them had the ability to fly, but with their excellent physical fitness, they traveled through the mountains at a very fast speed and approached quickly. At this moment, their eyes met, and the void seemed to burst with lightning and sparks, and there was no one else in their eyes. Attack at the same time. Newgate. Roger. Newgate. Roger. Drag the double swords of lightning and slash at each other at the same time. Boom. The earth-shaking air wave suddenly erupted and radiated directly to the entire island. The dazzling white light occupied all vision. The earth shook. 3 days later. The battle between the Roger pirates and the Whitebeard pirates, which lasted for 3 days and 3 nights, finally came to an end. At this time, the crews of both sides were having a party around a huge bonfire. Eating hot barbecue, hugging each other's necks and getting drunk, making loud laughter. There was no life and death fight like before. However, Buggy was a little absent-minded. Holding a roasted chicken leg in his hand, he quietly walked to the side of Shanks, poked the latter's waist, and said in a low voice, "Hey, Shanks, look at the guy in the hat." Huh. Shanks frowned and looked in the direction of Buggy's gaze. It was a boy of 15 or 16 years old, wearing a brown leather hat, with dark skin, and he was lowering his head to wipe his weapon, the sharp iron claw. He didn't seem to sleep during the truce yesterday and the night before yesterday. Buggy's tone was surprised. Huh, why? Shanks became curious. How should I know? I always feel that guy is not right. Baki's eyes were filled with fear, and he whispered. Anyway, if you meet that guy in the future, be careful. I always feel that he is very dangerous. Shanks smiled disapprovingly. You think too much, Buggy. That guy is just an intern of Captain Whitebeard. Besides, no matter how dangerous he is, can he be as dangerous as that Navy? That Navy. Baki seemed to recall some bad memories, and shuddered all over. That's right, but I didn't expect that the powerful samurai's arm was also broken by that Navy. Hey, why did I say, also? Shanks. Chapter 30 List. The bonfire was rising, and the aroma of barbecue and wine was floating in the air. Ha 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 ha. Newgate, I haven't seen you for so long, you're still so strong. Roger looked very familiar, put his arm around Whitebeard's shoulders, and blew hot air into the latter's ears with his face flushed from drinking. But why is your hairline getting higher and higher? He lifted up Whitebeard's captain's hat carelessly, with a look of surprise on his face. Everyone in the Whitebeard pirates. Whitebeard's eyes twitched, and a, well, appeared on his forehead. He gritted his teeth and said, I haven't seen you for so long, you still deserve a beating, Roger. He glanced at the thick-lined guy in front of him with a bad temper, and suddenly laughed. I heard that your pants were taken off. Roger's smile froze. That was an accident. It was an accident. He jumped up immediately and retorted excitedly, his face flushed. Whitebeard, who had pulled back a point, smiled happily. Really? But I heard that the Navy kid almost led the team to kill you in the Battle of Etwall. All the members of Roger's pirates. Seeing their frustrated look, Whitebeard felt that his mood suddenly became cheerful, and smiled. But that Navy kid is indeed very difficult. I was always at his hands before. Speaking of a certain person, all the people in the two legendary pirate groups suddenly fell silent. They have been roaming the sea for so many years, and they have fought and fought with countless strong men, and the number of battles with the Navy is countless. But only in the hands of the so-called King of the North Sea, they have experienced a painful lesson. Forget about this, Newgate, let's discuss something with you. Roger suddenly shook his head, rolled his eyes, licked his face and laughed. I refuse. Whitebeard looked at him expressionlessly. Roger's smile froze, and he said angrily, Hey, I haven't even opened my mouth yet, and you just refused. Whitebeard looked at me with an expression that he didn't know what you were up to, and sneered, Anyway, every time you open your mouth, there is nothing good. Don't say that. Roger said a little embarrassedly, it's just a small favor. Whitebeard narrowed his eyes, tell me about it. Roger's eyes lit up, and he pointed at Kazuki Odin who was sitting next to him eating meat. I want to borrow Brother Odin. Let him join my ship. After the voice fell, Kazuki Odin looked up in confusion, with a piece of barbecue hanging in the air with his one arm. Impossible. Whitebeard's face changed drastically, and his tone was firm. Roger, what are you thinking? Odin is my sworn brother. I can agree to other things, but I will never agree to this one. Seeing Whitebeard's refusal to give in, Roger's face changed. He and Whitebeard are old rivals, and he knows each other's character very well. Once he decides on something, no one can change it. But if he wants to complete the last voyage of the world tour, someone must be able to interpret the ancient texts in the historical text. Thinking of this, Roger gritted his teeth, and in the stunned and shocked eyes of the two pirate groups, he suddenly knelt on the ground with a bang. Newgate, just consider it as my beg you. 1 year, just 1 year, and I promise that Brother Odin will never be in any danger of life. I am already terminally ill, and the rest of my life. I want to reach the end of the world, and this cannot be done without Brother Odin. Please, Newgate. At this moment, the most powerful, domineering and freest pirate in the world bowed his proud head deeply to his opponent for his lifelong dream. A shock. New World, Happy Street. Hotel, top floor box. A soft big bed, all kinds of torn clothes scattered all over the floor. The naked beauty lay on the bed, her cheeks flushed, her breath warm, and her golden curly hair wet with crystal sweat. The pair of black bat wings behind her, symbolizing mystery and antiquity, gradually retracted as her body trembled. "My queen, can't you hold on so soon? I thought the animal-type mythical beasts were very strong." Darren casually put on a loose bathrobe, crossed his legs and sat on the leather sofa, holding a glass of iced whiskey in his hand and a lit cigar in his mouth, smiling. From his angle, he could clearly see the fair and delicate waist curve of the Queen of Joy Street. The two deep dimples on her slender waist looked particularly charming. Stussy rolled her eyes unhappily, pulled the quilt over her body with a dazed look, and snorted. The strength of the vampire form does not lie in the physical fight, and even if it is an awakened animal-type mythical beast, it may not be comparable to your indestructible body. Thinking of the shameful action he had just made, Stussy felt as if his skin was electrocuted, and he couldn't help but glare at the damn Navy fiercely. Darren laughed. He had to admit that looking at the notorious Queen of Fun Street in front of him, he couldn't help but feel a strong sense of accomplishment. At this time, 3 days had passed since the arrest of Barrett. After a simple day of recuperation, Barrett used the weapons and equipment on the warship to rebuild a small submarine, and then left the main force in disgrace. Darren didn't mean to stop him. After all, the freedom of the 7 warlords of the sea was still extremely high. Except for special circumstances, the Navy did not have much restraint on the 7 warlords of the sea. After Barrett left, he handed over the command of the 10 warships to Borsellino, and then ran to Fun Street. Well, the purpose was to collect intelligence. Didn't you say you wanted to collect intelligence? When Stussy saw the smile on Darren's lips, she gritted her teeth and hated him. This bastard used the secret of his double agent identity to manipulate him, and said strange things like, "You don't want your secret to be known," all day long. But she had no way to deal with him. She couldn't beat him, and she couldn't bite him. The most hateful thing was that Stussy felt that her body seemed to be addicted to it and couldn't resist it at all. "I can't help this guy. Collect intelligence. Oh, yes, I remember, I do need to collect intelligence." Darren patted his head and said, "Stussy. The names on this list, please help me check where these people are now, their strength, record, experience. As long as there is all the information about these people, I need it." Darren took out a crumpled paper from the pocket of his military uniform and handed it to Stussy. Stussy took it and looked at it seriously. The more she understood, the more she knew about Darren's character and personality. Everything he did was carefully considered. The real horror of this man is not his strength, but his ambition and layout. Since the names on this piece of paper can enter his sight, and he even uses his intelligence network to find them, there must be something special about them. However, when she saw the names on the paper, Stussy's eyes flashed with doubt. Because these people, she didn't know any of them. Jorakal Mahawk. Fisher Tiger. Moonlight Moria. Boa Hancock. Who are these? Stussy narrowed her eyes and stared at Darren and asked. Chapter 31. I am a well-tested naval officer. Looking at this slightly unfamiliar list, Stussy's heart flashed with doubt. She put on a sexy hollow silk nightgown, slightly covering her snow-white skin, and thought quickly with the list in her hand. This damn vice admiral in front of her is not a simple character. In addition to the incredible body and attractiveness, what makes Stussy deeply intoxicated is actually his confidence and domineering attitude in controlling everything in his words and deeds. This indestructible self-confidence, the firmness of never questioning his own decisions, and the calmness of making plans before acting, add a certain fatal aura to this man. This kind of confidence and domineering, Stussy has only seen in the 5 elders who represent the highest power of the world government in the past. But the unfathomable 5 elders are naturally qualified. Where does Darren get his confidence from? This is not something you should care about, Queen. Darren smoked a cigar with a half-smile and said. Our relationship is not good enough to confide secrets to each other, right? Stussy. This bastard. She bit her red lips, stood up from the soft bed, tapped the ground with her crystal-clear toes, and walked towards Darren with a leisurely pace. This woman seemed to know how to maximize her charm. Bare feet, toes painted with bright red nail polish, slender white legs, and the graceful curves looming under the sexy silk nightgown. This half-covered posture is the most tempting. Darren raised his eyebrows with interest. So, Vice Admiral Darren can tell me. Stussy walked to Darren's side, like a mysterious and dangerous beauty snake, and slid gently into the latter's arms, raised her hands to hug his neck, and slightly opened her red lips to exhale fragrance, with a seductive look. I am really curious. The famous Queen of Happy Street sat in his arms and acted coquettishly, her feet swaying in the air, which made people dizzy. This is a happy picture that Kaji could never imagine in his life. I'm sorry, this is a naval secret. Darren, however, had a stern face and said mercilessly. Unfortunately, I am a well-tested naval officer. Stussy. She was so angry that her eyebrows were raised, and her full chest rose and fell rapidly. You are the only one who has been tested. Smoking, drinking, greed, and lust. What test can you withstand? But since you are so curious, I can tell you the reason. Darren seemed to enjoy the woman's drastic mood changes because of him. Women are emotional animals, even if they are as powerful as Stussy, the same is true. If a man's words and deeds can easily make a woman's emotions fluctuate, it means that he is not far from conquering this woman. For a man, the most fatal reaction of a woman to him is not anger and resentment, but indifference. But before I tell you, why don't you help me check the intelligence of these people first? Darren said with a smile, with a shameless look of not seeing the rabbit and not releasing the eagle. Stussy rolled her eyes immediately. She stood up from Darren's arms, picked up the Den Den Mushi on the bedside table, dialed an internal signal, and read out the names on the list to the subordinates on the Den Den Mushi side one by one. Within 3 minutes, bring me all the information collected on this list. The way Stussy ordered her subordinates at this time was no longer gentle and seductive as before, but full of the style of a strong woman who was vigorous and decisive, without any dragging. Darren looked at her with appreciation. This woman is indeed worth cultivating. Although she can manage such a huge illegal industry as Happy Street, it is more or less inseparable from the support of the world government, but this cannot deny her outstanding personal ability. Time passed quickly, and in less than 2 minutes, the door of the box was knocked. Stussy walked over slowly and opened the door. A young woman in a formal dress and hip skirt stood outside the door respectfully, and gave Stussy both hands. Hand over a document. Stussy took the document, closed the door again, hesitated for a moment, and added. Don't worry about your identity being leaked. These people are all my subordinates who are trained by me and are loyal to me alone. Darren looked at her with a little surprise and smiled. I didn't ask. I don't want the subordinates I trained with great effort to disappear for no reason. Stussy glared at him. These subordinates have all had their memories modified by my devil fruit ability. Even if they are tortured the most horribly, they will not reveal any information about me. Darren suddenly realized and couldn't help but marvel. Your devil fruit ability is quite comprehensive. Stussy didn't say anything, just walked opposite Darren, crossed his legs, and looked through the documents in his hand. In the huge luxury box, the voice of the Queen of Happy Street gradually rang out. Jorakal Mahak, male, 17 years old, unknown origin, unknown strength, has a sharp eye like a falcon, good at swordsmanship, a lone ranger, appeared many times in the first half of the Grand Line. Fisher Tiger, male, fishman, about 25 years old, born in Ryugu Castle, Fishman Island, an adventurer, unknown strength, the most recent appearance was in the East China Sea. Gecko Moria, male, 23 years old, suspected to be a superhuman shadow fruit ability user, born in the West Sea, a rookie pirate, just entered the Grand Line, ambitious, and powerful. Boa Hancock, female, 3 years old, an informal crew member of the Nine Snakes Pirates, a native of Amazon Lily. When reading the last name, Stussy suddenly raised his head and looked at Darren with a very strange look, narrowing his eyes. What is your look? Darren's mouth twitched. Stussy suddenly smiled and said. The first 3 people are indeed worth recruiting and training. Although they are all newcomers, their strength and background are indeed very exciting, but this last one. Boa Hancock, she is only 3 years old. I just didn't expect you to have such a hobby. Ahem. Darren was almost choked to death by the cigar smoke. I'm not a pervert. He rolled his eyes unhappily. Don't you want to know why I'm looking for information about these people? I can tell you now that they are the future candidates for the 7 warlords of the sea that I have selected. Hearing this, the smile on Stussie's face froze. For more novels 170,067 join. Her beautiful eyes widened instantly, her face full of disbelief, as if she had heard some extremely terrifying news. This guy actually wants to interfere in the selection of the 7 warlords of the sea. Chapter 32 Kill him. Are you crazy? That's the Shichibukai. Stussi blurted out subconsciously, with shock on his face. This guy is simply a lunatic. As a member of the world government's highest intelligence agency CP0, Stussi knows better than others the hidden intention of the government to introduce this system. Recruiting pirates as Shichibukai and granting them the power to plunder legally is ostensibly used to curb the increasingly rampant pirate forces. Using the Shichibukai as a buffer point between the 2 major camps of pirates and the Navy, it presents a situation of mutual confrontation and mutual balance, thereby enhancing the world government's control over this sea. After all, the development of the Navy's combat power now has a tendency to break away from the control of the world government. Especially with the rise of the Navy's golden generation, the younger generation of naval forces headed by the 4 new generation monsters, Sakazuki, Borsellino, Darren and Kuzan, have gradually entered the core of the Navy's power and controlled many powerful positions in the Navy. Coupled with the existence of Darren's ultra-long-range and large-scale deterrence weapon, the Navy's military deterrence has reached its strongest period in history. Therefore, the deeper purpose of the 7 warlords of the sea system is for the world government to balance the growing power of the Navy. But now, Darren wants to interfere in the selection of the 7 warlords of the sea. This is tantamount to snatching food from the world government's tiger's mouth. So are you worried about me? Darren smiled playfully. I thought you would be very happy to see me committing suicide. Stussi gritted his teeth and said, I'm just worried that you will be targeted by the world government and leak all my secrets in the end. Darren smiled and said, only 2 candidates for the 7 warlords of the sea have been confirmed, which means there are still 5 vacancies left. I care about this, just simply want to provide suitable candidate suggestions to the honorable government. He spread his hands innocently. I am loyal to the government. A sneer appeared on Stussi's lips. She would never believe Darren's lies. She would rather believe that this ambitious and unruly guy is absolutely loyal to the world government. Believe that Happy Street is a serious place. And let's forget about the others. Jorakal Mahawk, Fisher Tiger and Gecko Mariah may have the potential to become Shichibukai, but that Boa Hancock is only 3 years old. She is only 3 years old. How can she be qualified to be Shichibukai? Stussi looked like she didn't believe you. So what are you planning? The government has a strict screening mechanism for the candidates of Shichibukai. You can't interfere at all. Let's not talk about anything else. Crocodile and Douglas Barrett, who have become Shichibukai, are not under your control. It's hard to say who do you think broke their hands. Darren looked at Stussi with a strange expression. Stussi. Hearing the confidence in Darren's tone, a huge wave suddenly rose in her heart. The 2 existing Shichibukai are both arranged by Darren. Somehow, she got angry when she saw Darren's confident and proud expression, and said with gritted teeth. So what? Except for the 2 of them, the other 5 Shichibukai candidates, the government has already given a series of names. Oh, Darren was interested, who is on the list? Anyway, none of the people on your list are there. Stussi smiled proudly. She took out a sealed document from the desk by the wall, opened it and handed it to Darren. Take a look for yourself. Darren opened the list and glanced at it casually. Dylan Fell, born in the North Sea, nicknamed Blood Axe, bounty of 104 million Baileys. Bodil Reinhardt, born in the West Sea, now in the New World, natural swamp fruit ability user, bounty of 120 million Baileys. All the names seem to be big pirates, with bounties of over 100 million, and their reputations are frightening. But in Darren's opinion, they are all extras who will die in one episode. How is it? Seeing Darren not speaking, Stussy thought that the latter was depressed because of the setback of the plan, and smiled. It's a pity, your plan is going to fail, Vice Admiral. Darren glanced at her and suddenly grinned. That's not necessarily true. Then, under Stussy's stunned eyes, she took out a Den Den Mushi and dialed the signal. 2 seconds later, the signal was connected, and a low voice came out from the Den Den Mushi. Darren. Yes, it's me. I heard that there's a guy named Blood Axe in our North Sea. Darren said lightly. The flying squirrel on the Den Den Mushi paused and replied. Yes, that guy didn't break the rules, so I didn't touch him. Kill him. Darren exhaled a puff of smoke. No problem. Without questioning any of Darren's decisions, the flying squirrel hung up the Den Den Mushi directly, and his figure turned into lightning and disappeared in the base chief's office. He and Darren have fought side by side for so many years, and they have a lot of tacit understanding that others can't imagine. Even if the request is strange, the flying squirrel will execute it without hesitation. What are you doing? Stussy finally realized what Darren was going to do at this time, and stared at him in disbelief. This guy, is he serious? However, Stussy sneered again. According to the intelligence, Blood Axe is very cautious. Even the Vice Admiral of the Navy headquarters may not be able to kill him. Don't waste your time. Bulu bulu, bulu bulu. The sound of the military Den Den Mushi interrupted Stussy's words. Her face changed slightly, and a bad premonition came to her heart. She stared at the Den Den Mushi in Darren's hand. Could it be? Darren noticed her gaze and connected the signal with a smile. It's me. The low voice of the flying squirrel came from the Den Den Mushi again. Killed him. Stussy's pupils suddenly shrank into pins. How long has it been since the two Den Den Mushi communications? Less than a minute. Are you kidding? But she knew very well in her heart that the man in front of her didn't need to fool her. It's troublesome. Darren smiled and chatted for a few words, then disconnected the Den Den Mushi signal. He raised his head and said with a half smile. What did you want to say just now? Stussy's face froze, and he was so angry that his teeth itched. What's wrong with killing a Blood Axe? There are more than a dozen people on this list as candidates. Can you kill them all? Who said you can't? Darren smiled fearlessly. He stood up slowly, walked to Stussy, patted the latter's smooth face gently, and smiled. Listen carefully, my queen, what I said will come true. The guys I chose will all become the 7 warlords of the sea, it's just a matter of time. He raised Stussy's chin frivolously. But there is no doubt that the 7 warlords of the sea will all become mine. Stussy was trembling with Darren's teasing action, and gritted his teeth and said. I don't believe it. Darren smiled and said. If you don't believe it, we can make a bet. Stussy was also provoked at this time. You want to bet what? Darren smiled. If you win, I can agree to any of your conditions. But if you lose. He slowly extended his index finger and gently stroked Stussy's red lips. If I lose, I can also agree to any of your conditions. Stussy said unwillingly. Deal. Darren smiled with satisfaction. Then you have to call me Master. Chapter 33 Special Instructor. Master. Hearing this shameful title, Stussy's heart jumped suddenly, her long legs subconsciously closed together, and her silver teeth clenched. What on earth is in this bastard's head? Why does he, a Navy, know so much about these romantic things? Who is the head of this happy street? She gritted her teeth in indignation. Then we'll see. But before that, you are not allowed to touch me again. She secretly made up her mind that she must not let Darren, the arrogant bastard, succeed, otherwise she would never be able to raise her head in front of him. Okay. Darren smiled indifferently. With his current power and combat power, there may be things that he cannot do in this sea, but intervening in the 7 warlords of the sea is not one of them. As for this so-called bet, in addition to being on a whim, Darren has other ideas in his mind. He wants to completely control, no, conquer the Queen of Happy Street in front of him. Although he now has the secret of Stussy's double agent, and can force her to obey his orders, Using threats to get others to do things for him is not Darren's favorite style, and it is not a safe way. Only through strong declarations and facts can one prove his incomparable strength, so that a woman like Stussy can be completely subdued. Interfering in the selection of the 7 warlords of the sea is a good opportunity. Through this incident, he can completely tie Stussy to his chariot. As for how to do it, he has a plan in his mind. Thinking of this, Darren raised a light arc at the corner of his mouth, extinguished the cigar in his hand, and looked at Stussy again. "Well, let's talk about business now." "Business? What business?" Stussy was stunned. But she soon saw Darren's malicious eyes. "What do you want to do?" Darren smiled and hugged Stussy's slender waist. "What do you think? It's not enough." Stussy's eyes widened. This guy's physique is too terrible. However, as Darren's rough and powerful hands gently slid across her back, her body trembled and goosebumps appeared on her fair skin. "Didn't you say that you are not allowed to touch me before the bet is over?" Anger and shame flashed in Stussy's eyes, and she glared at Darren fiercely. But she didn't dodge. As if she was expecting something. "The bet can start later." Darren smiled. 1 hour later. Darren put on his military uniform with a refreshed spirit, and his figure soared directly from the window and soon disappeared in the distance. Another 15 minutes passed. Stussy, who was limp all over, recovered some strength, and his slightly dilated pupils became clear. "Damn bastard, what a bad taste, tearing all the clothes into pieces." She looked at the silk nightgown torn into pieces beside the bed and clenched her fists in anger. Half a month passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, time has entered the 1495th year of the Hyuan calendar. Marineford, the headquarters of the Navy, the military hospital. "Congratulations, Vice Admiral Darren, Madam Shi, judging from the current situation, the fetus is in very healthy physical condition. No, it can even be described as extraordinarily strong." The female doctor flipped through the examination report in her hand and smiled at Darren and Tianyu Shi. "It is indeed the blood of Lieutenant General Darren. The heartbeat strength of this fetus alone is at least twice that of fetuses of the same age." Darren and Tianyu Shi breathed a sigh of relief when they heard this, and a smile appeared on their faces. Even though Darren had experienced countless storms in life and death, he couldn't help but feel a little nervous at this moment. This is his first blood in 2 lives. He naturally seemed a little uneasy without any experience. But one thing to note is that because the fetus is developing very well, Madam Shi should pay a little attention to supplementing enough nutrition, don't work too hard, and pay attention to resting your body. The female doctor added. "Thank you, doctor, we will pay attention." Ashi gently stroked her slightly bulging belly and smiled peacefully. As if due to the progesterone, her already stunning face was shining with a faint maternal glow, which was beyond description. "Thank you, doctor." Darren also said sincerely, and then took Ashi back to their mansion. After the last communication with Zhongguo, Darren's mansion received the highest level security, and there are experienced family doctors and nurses in the other courtyard to help with Ashi's daily care. Even without showing his observation haki, Darren could vaguely sense that there were many elite troops stationed around the mansion, and the defense was very tight. "Come, Ashi, have a good rest. I'll ask the kitchen to prepare lunch for you." Darren carefully helped Ashi and let her sit comfortably on the sofa. After settling Ashi, he turned and walked out of the inner room, came to the courtyard of the mansion, lit a cigar, and exhaled a long breath. Ashi's pregnancy took much more time and effort than he had imagined. But when he thought of the former's happy smile, Darren felt that it was all worth it. "Are you worried now? There will be many troubles in the future." A low voice with a teasing smile suddenly sounded from outside the door. Darren looked up and saw Zepha walking in with his head held high, holding a beautifully packaged fruit basket in his hand. "Teacher Zepha, why are you here?" he asked in surprise. Zepha smiled, threw the fruit basket into Darren's arms, and said with a big smile. "You haven't come back to the training camp to visit me since you graduated. There's nothing I can do. I can only come to visit you in person. But think about it and you can understand it. As a teacher, I can't really help you. I'm just misleading you." He sighed helplessly. Darren. That knot hasn't been resolved yet. Darren smiled awkwardly. After all, he did something wrong. Since I graduated, I haven't been back to the training camp. It's understandable that Zepha, the old man, complains. I'm sorry, Mr. Zepha. You know that. Zepha waved his hand to interrupt Darren's words, and smiled indifferently. I know you are busy, I can understand. You have never stopped since graduation, from Wano country to Wano country, from Kaido to Golden Lion, and not long ago, you launched a demon-killing order to capture the Devil's Descendant. He took off his sunglasses and looked at Darren with burning eyes. It is my luck to have such an excellent student like you. He glanced at the room and asked with concern. How is Ashi's health? It is no secret that Tianyushi lives in Marineford as Darren's partner. In fact, Zepha, Sengoku and Crane will send various nutritional supplements and greetings from time to time. Ashi herself has a good personality, and she is generous and decent, which makes these old guys like her very much. Especially Zepha, a semi-retired pillar of the Navy, is very satisfied with Ashi and treats her like his own daughter. Everything is fine, Ashi and the fetus are both healthy. Zepha nodded, patted Darren on the shoulder and said, I know you are a stinky boy who can't sit still and often runs out. When you are not around, I will help take care of you. Don't worry. But this time, in addition to visiting you and Ashi, I did have another thing. Darren said in a deep voice. Teacher Zepha, you say. For Zepha, a stubborn and respectable old man, he couldn't put on the usual scumbag attitude, and rarely became serious. Zepha smiled and said. Don't be so serious, it's not a big deal. You should also know that the scale of the officer training camp is constantly expanding. More and more young people want to come to the headquarters for training, but I have limited energy and can't discipline them. And your situation has also given me some inspiration. As if he remembered Darren's special training experience, Zepha's mouth twitched, and he shook his head with a sigh, and then said, I decided to try and introduce new teaching methods in the next new training camp. He paused and stared at Darren expectantly. Darren, I hope you can serve as a special instructor for the officer training camp. Chapter 34 List of Students. Zephyr's eyes radiated bright light, and he said in a deep voice. Since Darren and his golden generation graduated from the officer training camp, the whole world has set off a crazy Navy craze. Especially Darren's inspiring speech at the graduation ceremony, and his subsequent series of brilliant achievements that shocked the world, made him an idol worshipped by countless Navy officers. Even the headquarters has imitated Darren. Navy soldiers and officers almost never put down their cigarettes, combed their hair back, and their enthusiasm for going out to sea to fight pirates was also extremely high. As a result, Zepha's training camp quota was also competed for by a large number of Navy officers, and his status rose. Based on this situation, Zepha had already discussed with Zhang Guo, and finally decided to expand the new officer training camp on a small scale, increase the number of admissions, and actively introduce external instructors to share the teaching pressure of Zepha, the chief instructor. At the same time, through the teaching style of external instructors that is different from the traditional one, mutual learning can be promoted, and novel teaching methods can be further developed to adapt to the advent of a new era. This is a brand new reform of the training camp, and Zepha himself has placed countless expectations on this plan. But the prerequisite for the success of this plan is that Darren agrees to become the first external instructor of the training camp. Darren was somewhat surprised to hear Zepha's proposal. Specially appointed instructor. Just me. He didn't know how to react for a moment. As a student, he was extremely experienced. But as a teacher, he was really unfamiliar with teaching students. The most important point is that being an instructor will take up a lot of time and energy. Darren, who is used to a lazy and free life, finds it difficult to accept this change in lifestyle. He thought about it and said slowly, Teacher Zepha, I think I am not qualified for the important task of an instructor. And you don't need to hesitate too much because of me. Your teaching ability and level are definitely the best in this sea. Darren didn't lie. Misleading students is just a joke, don't take it too seriously. At least Zephyr will never mislead students. This semi-retired old man in front of him, but he has trained monsters like Sakaski, Borsellino, and Kuzan, and the chief instructor of the golden generation of the Navy. His teaching level is naturally beyond doubt. In fact, Darren himself is quite clear about this. If Zephyr hadn't helped him lay a solid foundation in the training camp, he would never have achieved what he has today. It is for this reason that Darren is grateful and respectful to Zephyr. Don't worry, this external instructor won't take up too much of your time. Zephyr waved his hand. With his experience and vision, he could guess what Darren was thinking. Outside instructors do not need to work in the military academy for a long time. They only need to come to the training camp twice a month to give lectures and share their personal insights and practice experiences. It will never affect your normal life and work. I will not interfere with the specific teaching content. You can give full play to it. As for the quality of teaching, I have full confidence in you. Zephyr took out a cigar, lit it, took a puff and continued. Guion and Kaji have mentioned to me that when you were in Beihai, you once provided guidance to their practice, and the effect was quite good. He blinked at Darren. Darren. Well, it seems that you have done your homework before coming here. And Darren, being an external instructor is also a good thing for you. Zephyr looked at Darren's hesitant expression and decided to add fuel to the fire. He added. Although they are only external instructors, to some extent, the students who have been taught by you have the status of master and apprentice with you. When they graduate from the military academy and gradually move to various positions in the army to become the backbone of the Navy, they will be a huge support for you to compete with Sakaski and others for the position of admiral and even marshal in the future. Zephyr is not ignorant of politics and power, but he is too lazy to care about it. However, since Darren is addicted to power, he can only start from this aspect. And think about it, those geniuses and monsters who are famous in the sea in the future will all be your students. What a great honor it will be. At this point, he proudly puffed up his chest, quite complacent. Just look at me and you will know. Even those unruly brats like Sakaski, Borsellino, and Kuzan have to call me, teacher, respectfully when they see me. Yes, they were also very active when they were giving orders, taking action, and burying graves. Darren couldn't help but secretly complain in his heart. However, he had to admit that what Zephyr proposed was indeed attractive. Increase your reputation and status, and develop a group of students loyal to you, and increase your voice in the naval system in the future. All you have to do is sacrifice a little free time. There is no reason not to do such a good thing. Since teacher Zephyr values you so much, I can't let you down. Darren laughed and agreed readily. I will definitely do my job as an instructor, learn from you, and contribute a little to the great cause of justice. Zephyr rolled his eyes. He knew the character of this brat. He would not do anything that was not beneficial. Okay, the tricks you used to fool Sengoku won't work with me. He said unhappily. Darren said sincerely. I'm telling the absolute truth, Mr. Zephyr. People say Vice Admiral Garp is our Navarro, but in my opinion, you who have devoted your life to the cause of justice and trained so many outstanding students are the heroes who deserve it. You. Zephyr kept waving his hands, but the corners of his mouth could no longer be suppressed. It must be said that Darren's words really touched his heart. Okay, then this matter is decided. Zephyr slowed down, extinguished his cigar, and then took out a document from his arms and handed it to Darren. This is the tentative list of the latest training camp. You can take a look first, but it has to be kept secret for the time being. In addition, if you have any good candidates, you can also directly join Go Up. As an external instructor, this is one of your rights. I think your subordinate, the current North Sea Admiral Flying Squirrel, is quite good. If you think it's appropriate, you can add him to the list. Darren didn't say anything, but just flipped through the list, and soon his eyes lit up. Because he saw several familiar names on the list. T. Penjin, Shuzo, Virgo, Dor, and Magellan. I haven't appeared for a long time, please help me, thank you. Say hello to the big guys, are you on vacation? Chapter 35 The list of those who must die. When Darren saw this list, he was undoubtedly a little surprised. Because he knew that in the original plot, most of the naval talents in the later generations had gradually graduated from the officer training camp. In fact, the officers' training camp of the Navy headquarters only had the most valuable students in the first and second classes. This already included the monsters in the original plot, the 3 admirals of the Navy, Monkey D. Dragon who later founded the Revolutionary Army, and some of the Golden Generation elite generals. Originally, he thought that after he became a specially appointed instructor, the quality of the students in the training camp would be ordinary, but he didn't expect that there were still many slippery fish. Seeing those familiar names on the list, Darren suddenly felt that his decision to agree to Zephyr becoming a special instructor in the training camp was correct. T. Penn. Known as the Ship Slayer, he first appeared on the eve of the Judicial Island incident in the original plot. He was responsible for escorting Nico Robin and had a brief fight with Zoro. Although he was defeated, he showed an unyielding heart of a strong man. He is full of justice and cares about his subordinates. 2 years after the end of the war on the top, his strength increased rapidly, and his rank jumped to the Vice Admiral of the Navy headquarters. He was entrusted with the important task of security for the World Conference. Unfortunately, he was killed by civilians because of the bounty of the Cross Union founded by Buggy. Harm in exchange for bounty. Shuzo. In the original plot, he is a radical tough Navy, the favorite of the former Navy headquarters Admiral Zephyr. After Zephyr left the Navy, he always followed Zephyr and assisted Zephyr in establishing the Neo Navy. He is Zephyr's right-hand man. He is proficient in armament hockey and 6-style physical techniques, and his strength is quite good. Virgo. There is no need to say more about this. Darren is very familiar with it. He is the inner ghost planted in the Navy by his useless godson. Virgo lurked in the Navy for 20 years, and was promoted to Vice Admiral of the Navy. In the end, he even took charge of the New World G5 Navy branch and became the base chief of the G5 branch. Door. This name is a little unfamiliar, and Darren can't remember much. I just remember that she is a Vice Admiral of the Navy headquarters and the base commander of the Navy G14 branch. As for the last name, this is purely a pleasant surprise. Magellan. The Iron Wall of the future Impel Down, the director of the deep-sea prison Impel Down, known as the strongest man in the prison, the man who once killed 3 emperors alone. The superhuman poison fruit he possesses is an almost unsolvable ability. The poison it produces can paralyze the nerves of creatures, cause pain or hallucinations, and even cause death, and the venom is strong enough to melt stones with one blow. The poisoned person needs Magellan's antidote to be saved. I dare not say in other environments, but with Magellan's devil fruit ability, in the cramped and closed environment of Impel Down, it is definitely a general-level combat power. And unlike others, Darren knows Magellan's character. He is a stubborn person who commits seppuku at any time. With such a character, Magellan would definitely treat him as a disciple and sincerely call him teacher. It can be said without hesitation that although the value of this list is not as good as the first and second sessions, it can also be called a gathering of generals. How about it, Darren boy, are there any students you like? Zeph saw Darren thinking seriously and couldn't help laughing. This is the fun of being a teacher. When you find a good seedling, you can't help but feel a kind of expectation in your heart. How far can these outstanding young people go and how dazzling they become under their own guidance? The sense of accomplishment of cultivating an excellent student is enormous, at least in Zeph's opinion, even better than defeating a big pirate who has done a lot of evil. I can't see it for the time being, but I will work hard, Teacher Zepha. Darren came back to his senses, withdrew his eyes from the list, and said with a smile. Zeph smiled and patted his shoulder. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. Okay, the entrance ceremony for new students will be held in 10 days. Come over and briefly introduce yourself to the new students, so that you can get familiar with their situation. At this point, he seemed to remember something, his expression became strange, and he added. Don't be too outrageous this time. He remembered the shocking declaration made by this brat at the graduation ceremony, and the corners of his mouth couldn't help twitching. Zepha left after a brief explanation. The new training camp is about to start, and all kinds of affairs at the military academy have piled up, waiting for him to go back and deal with them. Darren sat in the yard and smoked a cigar quietly. Just as he was about to go into the house to see Ashi again, a slow voice suddenly sounded behind him. "You are really leisurely, Lieutenant General Darren." Darren smiled, turned around, looked at Borsellino who was leaning against the wall with his hands in his pockets, and smiled. "I am on legal leave now, Lieutenant General Borsellino." After the incident of the demon-killing order against Douglas Barrett, Sengoku approved Darren a month's vacation. On the one hand, it was to compensate for the pressure of frequent missions in the past 2 or 3 months, and on the other hand, it was to give Darren enough time to accompany Tianyushi. Borsellino said helplessly. "I really envy you, but I'm sorry, your vacation is over." "Oh, what happened this time?" Darren asked with interest. Borsellino sighed. "About the candidates for the 7 warlords of the sea. The list of candidates for the 7 warlords of the sea was leaked, which was nothing. But for some reason, in the past half-month, all the candidates on the list have been killed one after another, and it is even impossible to find out who did it. There were originally more than a dozen candidates, but now only 2 or 3 lucky ones are still alive. So, the government is furious now and has ordered our Navy headquarters to thoroughly investigate this matter and find the murderer as soon as possible. Admiral Zongguo is already very busy with this matter. Sakazuki has been assigned, but the government is urging us to do it. The military needs to send more combat forces to investigate this matter thoroughly. Admiral Zongguo asked me to come here and ask you to go to the Marshal's mansion. I guess he wants you to go on a mission." At this point, Borsellino looked at Darren with a smile. "But Darren, you don't know who did it, do you?" Darren's eyes moved slightly, and he raised his hands in surprise and surrendered. "How is this possible? I haven't left the headquarters in the past half-month, how could I know such news?" Borsellino met Darren's eyes. "That's right." He nodded. Then, the two people who looked at each other laughed at the same time. Chapter 36 Hunting Operation. A certain sea area in the New World. The sky above the island was covered with heavy thunderclouds, and the dark sea of clouds was like a huge hood, pressing down on the earth. Lightning and thunder, the running lightning swam in the sea of clouds, like a dragon roaring in it. The white birdcage covered the entire island. The jungle-covered island had turned into a sea of fire at this time, and the jungle and the ground were full of pits and charred pits. The burning flames stirred up billowing black smoke, filling the surroundings. Fallen trees and charred earth on the ground, one could vaguely see a series of terrifying cuts crisscrossing each other. "Damn, who are you, anyway?" Filkas stood there with his body charred and bloody, as if his skin and muscles were cut off piece by piece, like a bloody man. The Navy, the pirates, actually joined forces. He had an expression of disbelief on his face. He had fought his way into the New World from the South China Sea with his powerful physical skills, and his bounty was rising steadily, even exceeding 100 million berries. The number of his subordinates, there were 1,000 of them, which was a strong force even in the New World. But just when he was ambitious and ready to do something big, he ran into those two guys. Everything was over. An unprecedented despair stained his pupils. The reflection of his pupils showed blood and body fragments all over the ground, as well as a pirate ship cut in half on the coast. The pirate group he had worked so hard to build was slaughtered by those two monster-like guys in less than 3 minutes. Blood gushed out of his nose, and Filgas, bloodshot pupils stared at the figure slowly falling in the sky. Pink feather coat, short golden hair, and a rebellious smile on the corner of his mouth. Doflamingo bent his 10 fingers and hooked them, controlling the invisible silk thread, and walked towards the unlucky guy step by step. The silk thread that bound Filgas' body quickly tightened, cutting his skin easily like a sharp blade, presenting a grid-like wound. Filgas trembled with pain, and he roared hoarsely. "Why? We have never met before." He couldn't figure it out no matter what. He had never met this blonde guy. Why did he come directly to his door and slaughter his pirate group? Why? Doflamingo raised a mocking grin, and his eyes were full of disdain and ridicule when he looked at Filkas. "What a stupid question. Does the fight between pirates need a reason? There is only one throne of hegemony, and only the last one to survive can reach the top. Of course, if you must find a reason, I can only say that you are on a list of people who must die. The list of people who must die. Filkes was stunned, with doubts and confusion in his eyes. What list? I didn't do anything. But before he could react, the people in front of him, the blonde boy, had already flicked his finger. Swish. A bunch of silk threads wrapped with armed color domineering, like a sniper rifle bullet, pierced his heart directly. A large piece of blood mist exploded on his chest, his body twitched unconsciously, and the vitality in his pupils quickly faded. Filkes, nicknamed Blood Shadow Swordsman, bounty of 117 million Baileys. Die. With his death, a blue lightning suddenly shot down from the sea of clouds in the sky, passed through the gap between the bird cages, and quickly gathered on the ground into a powerful and deep figure. How many people are on the list? Doflamingo didn't even look at the corpse, turned his head to look at the flying squirrel with lightning on its body, and asked coldly. With the hook of his fingers, the white bird cage covering the entire island slowly shrank and faded like a tide, and finally disappeared without a trace. There are 17 people on the list, and 4 are still alive. The flying squirrel took out a piece of paper, flipped it open and took a look, and said lightly. He glanced at the bloody scene around him that was like purgatory on earth and frowned. The pieces of the pirates' bodies were everywhere, the blood dyed the earth red, and even the air was filled with a strong smell of blood. Your methods are too cruel, Doflamingo. Since this guy walked out of the North Sea, his hostility and murderous intent have become more and more intense, as if the shackles on the beast were gradually broken free, and his ferocity was completely aroused. It is not a good sign to enjoy killing and even enjoy the pleasure of torturing the enemy. Doflamingo shrugged and sneered disapprovingly. If you don't like it, leave the next action to me alone. The flying squirrel shook his head and said indifferently. No, for safety reasons, I have to work with you. The guys on the list are all pirates with bounties of over 100 million. Their strength should not be underestimated. If they are not careful, they will capsize in the gutter. If the news of our hunting of the candidates for the King's 7 warlords of the sea is leaked, it will lead to unpredictable consequences. Doflamingo sneered. How could that happen? Once the birdcage is opened, everyone in the cage will become my prey, and no one can escape. The flying squirrel glanced at him and suddenly said. There are always special cases. For example, the birdcage has no meaning to me. Doflamingo's expression froze, but he had no way to refute it. If it were someone else, Doflamingo would have killed him directly. But this guy is different. This guy's thunder fruit ability is terrifyingly powerful, especially after the elementalization. He has the speed and destructive power of lightning, and the birdcage can't trap him at all. Even Doflamingo vaguely realized that even if he entered the New World and mastered hockey, he would not be a match for this guy. And the most important point is that even he has mastered hockey, what about this guy? Doflamingo dare not bet. Looking at Doflamingo's changing expression, the flying squirrel said lightly. You don't need to be too repulsive to my existence. After all, clearing the list of candidates for the 7 warlords of the sea will also benefit you. I don't deny that your strength has become much stronger. Coupled with the special nature of the birdcage, it is not a big problem to hunt the people on the list, but it is always right to be careful. Darren once said that he learned to be careful in the North Sea over the years. Women and children can be careless, but men can't. Doflamingo, I'm helping you. Besides, this is Darren's order. After hearing the last sentence, Doflamingo fell silent. I have to admit that my birdcage and the large-scale bombing of this guy's thunder fruit did play an extremely amazing power in the previous hunting operation. For a full half a month, they used their respective flying abilities to hunt these so-called 7 warlords of the sea candidates, all over the sea according to the names on the list. This is already their 12th target. Each action will never last more than 5 minutes. No matter how many troops or pirate ships the enemy has. The result is the same. The birdcage falls, thunder bombs, and ends the target. The two are even more skilled in cooperation. Even though they know that the Navy and the world government are investigating this matter, no flaws are found. The signal is blocked, the scene is burned, and the bodies are torn apart. Even the professional CP department members of the world government can't find any clues. After a few seconds of silence, Doflamingo turned around and walked towards the coast. "Let's go, aren't there still 4? Don't waste time." The flying squirrel looked at his back and narrowed his eyes. On the arm hidden under the sleeves of the military uniform, a touch of solemn darkness quickly faded. Chapter 37 Sengoku Who Takes the Blame. Why did this happen? What's going on? I need an explanation, Sengoku. When Darren and Borsellino walked slowly to the Admiral's office, they could hear the roar of a cold voice across the corridor. There are 17 people on the list of the 7 warlords of the sea, but only 5 are left alive. The adults are very dissatisfied with this. Darren frowned. There are only a few big names in the Navy headquarters, but he has never remembered this voice, it is very unfamiliar. He also noticed that outside the door of the Admiral's office, the 2 Navy guards on duty were standing there trembling. In the office, pretending to be deaf, it seems that he didn't hear the words coming out of the office at all. This is. Darren cast an inquiring look at Borsellino. Borsellino shrugged helplessly and muttered in a low voice. The list of candidates for the 7 warlords of the sea is highly confidential. In addition to important officials in the government and senior CP agents, the only 2 people in the Navy who are qualified to know it are Marshal Kong and Admiral Sengoku. Now the candidates for the 7 warlords of the sea have been slaughtered one after another by unknown forces. The government believes that the person who did it is likely to target the 7 warlords of the sea, and began to suspect that someone leaked the list. He pointed to the door of the Admiral's office and grinned. Isn't it that the CP department came to find us as soon as possible? Darren raised his eyebrows and said with interest. So the CP side is suspicious. Do you suspect that the murderer who hunted down the candidates for the 7 warlords of the sea is related to Admiral Sengoku? Borsellino smiled and said. Who knows, but the Navy headquarters has always been opposed to the establishment of the 7 warlords of the sea system. And Admiral Sengoku is the only one in the Navy who knows the list, so it is normal for CP to have doubts. Poor Admiral Sengoku took the blame for the real murderer. He glanced at Darren casually. Darren pretended not to see the guy's playful eyes and walked straight to the door of the office. When the 2 Navy soldiers saw Darren and the others, they were shocked and raised their hands to salute. Darren waved his hand and pushed the door open. As soon as he opened the door, he saw Zhang Guo standing there with red face and ears, slamming the table in anger. So you are doubting me? I have been in the army for decades, from an ordinary private to today's admiral of the Navy. How many pirates have I defeated, how many missions have I performed for the government? How dare you doubt me? He was panting, as if he was very angry. As this sentence fell, he saw Darren and Borsellino walked in one after the other. General Zhang Guo, you are looking for me. Darren saluted, his eyes inadvertently fell on the other 2 cold figures in the office. The 2 were wrapped in a loose white silk robe, exuding a cold breath, and their faces were covered by masks with strange patterns, making it impossible to tell their true identities. The highest intelligence agency of the world government. CP0. The CP0 on the left is a little taller, wearing a black mandala mask. He was the one who questioned Zhang Guo just now. The other one is wearing a fox mask, with slightly curly golden hair falling from under the mask. The graceful body curves under the white silk can be vaguely seen, and she is wearing a pair of red stiletto high heels. This CP0 is a woman. She seemed to be stunned when she saw Darren. Darren narrowed his eyes, and a hint of playful arc appeared at the corner of his mouth. It's a coincidence that I met an acquaintance. Well, Darren, you're here. Zhang Guo saw Darren and the others walk into the office, took a deep breath, forced down his anger, and said stiffly. This is a CP member sent by the government. Their main task is to investigate the hunting of the candidates for the 7 warlords of the sea. Borsellino should have told you the relevant information, right? Darren nodded and smiled. I know all the relevant information, General Zhang Guo. But. He looked at the 2 CP0s, his eyes narrowed dangerously. It seems that you two are not very satisfied with the answer of our Navy. Seeing Darren's eyes, the female CP0 seemed to have sensed something bad, and subconsciously stepped back half a step. The other person was unmoved and sneered sarcastically. This should be the famous, King of the North Sea, Vice Admiral Darren, who just killed the great pirate Golden Lion Shaki. But what's with this undisguised murderous aura? I am a member of the highest intelligence agency of the world government, and I came here on the orders of the 5 elders. Before he finished speaking, his face under the mask suddenly changed. How dare you? A sharp black light suddenly passed through the window, and with a terrifying impact force that could kill everything, it instantly reached the man. Don't be impulsive, Darren. Zhang face changed slightly and he exclaimed. Dang! Boom! A sharp explosion that almost shattered the eardrums suddenly sounded, followed by a fierce wind that exploded in the office like the roar of a giant dragon, rolling up the papers all over the sky. As if hit by a cannon, CP0 was knocked back several meters, and the impact of the air wave caused large cracks on the wall of the office. A drop of cold sweat slowly slid down the chin of the CP0 member. His hands were covered with armed color domineering, tightly grasping a black knife with a demonic aura. The powerful impact of the demonic knife caused a large number of sparks to splash in his palms, and the handle of the knife shook constantly. The sudden change made everyone present suddenly change color. Only Borsellino looked like he was watching the fun, and he was busy with his own affairs. Sitting on the sofa, he crossed his legs. Are you crazy? How dare you attack me? After being stunned for a second, the CP0 finally came back to his senses from the shock and fear, and an angry roar came from under the mask. He couldn't believe it. This Navy kid dared to attack him in front of so many people. But what he couldn't believe was that if he had reacted a little slower, he would probably be a corpse now. Looking at the demon sword in front of him that exuded a gloomy ghost aura, CP0 swallowed uneasily. Demon sword, Yan Mo. The peerless demon sword that swallowed the Momo fruit, under the control of this navy, has the terrifying destructive power to destroy a small island with one blow. As expected of a high-level agent carefully trained by the world government, he actually blocked Yan Mo's 10 times faster shooting. Darren tilted his neck and smiled. Mr. CP0, do you know what Yan Mo's fastest shooting speed can reach? It's 50 times. Darren sighed. That's 5 times as fast as before. After the words fell, CP0 felt a chill on his spine and his pores stood up. His face was extremely ugly.